during Game Day Live Overtime, sponsored by Michael's Italian Feast.
Welcome back to Game Day Live Overtime. Now time for a deeper dive into the big games of the night. Joining us first is Steve Cease from our Twin Cities newsroom. You can follow him on Twitter at Prof. Cease for score updates on Friday nights. Steve covered tonight's matchup between arch rivals Normal West and Normal Community in a game that was very one-sided, and that Normal Community defense did a job on the guy that ran for 5 touchdowns last week at Normal West, right, Cody Mulbauer?
Yeah, and that's all we heard about coming up to this game, Kurt, was Cody Mulbauer, Superman, the 5-touchdown performance, 350 yards last week. Well, if he's Superman, the Ironman defense was kryptonite tonight. Mulbauer held to less than 70 yards on 19 carries tonight, stopped for a loss 4 times, no touchdowns, only 2 plays of 10 or more yards. The Ironman defense had 8 team tackles for a loss. 4 of those were sacks. They limited the Wildcats to just 43 team rushing yards all night. Xavier Lashley had a great interception for the Ironman defense. So that Normal Community defense is for real. They went up against a tough task in that Normal West run game tonight, and they took care of business.
And certainly offensively, the Iron were able to move the football. They had a 14-7 lead at the end of a quarter and then really delivered a knockout punch in that second quarter.
Yeah, Kurt, I was impressed with how Community's offense was spreading the wealth so much. There were a lot of different guys who got involved tonight. Quarterback Kyle Beatty had a great night, 10 for 17, 3 touchdowns, $195 through the air, also rushed for a touchdown as well. Running back Kalen Taylor had a great game, 12 carries, $162 on the ground, 2 touchdowns, also had 2 catches. Marquand Gary, you can talk about Marquand Gary all day long. The speed is phenomenal, 4 catches tonight, 2 touchdowns, 90 yards. Ivo Austin had 2 catches. Michael Mavick had 2 catches. It was a team effort on offense, and got to give, of course, a big shout out to those guys up front as well, because that offensive line had both the passing game and the running game working well tonight.
And certainly Normal West now has an opportunity to learn from their mistakes and hopefully march forward, because this has got to be a learning experience for them.
Yeah, they're probably happy to see Danville on the schedule. The Vikings not looking so great so far this year, coming up next week. But the schedule gods were not kind to them in the beginning of the year. They had Notre Dame last week, and they finish out September with Peoria and Bloomington. And BHS looking like they're much improved from last year after their big win over U-High tonight. Peoria is always going to be a big player in the Big 12. So the Wildcats got to figure this out, and they got to figure it out quick. And for Normal Community, they are in a similar situation. They have Urbana next week, which you got to think the Ironmen would win, but then they go to Kankakee to play on the road, which could be almost a playoff preview in some ways.
All right, Steve, good seeing you tonight. Thanks for your analysis. We look forward to hearing from you next week. Now across the studio to Patrick with analysis of another game that paired a couple of playoff teams from a year ago against one another.
Thank you, Kurt. We welcome to the studio Jonathan Michael, General Manager of Clutch Sports Media. Covered a battle of 1-0 teams tonight. Not only that, just 3 miles apart, U-High and Bloomington. You think they'd play every year. First time they've played in almost 50 years. 1976 was their last meeting, and it was a barn burner tonight with Bloomington winning 41-38. Your thoughts on the game, Jonathan?
Well, Patrick, it was worth the wait. I mean, you couldn't have asked for much better of a game. It was a close game all the way throughout. Bloomington got a little bit of an early lead. They led 14-0 in the first half before UI started to make it a little bit close. But, you know, I mean, just back and forth, great offense, great defense. Defensive game in the first half, offensive floodgates opened up in half number 2.
I was going to say, it looked like it was about 13-6 there in the second quarter. So, you know, how did we get to 41-38 in the second half?
Well, Bloomington, lots of quick strike plays. That was a huge reason that they won that game. 96-yard kick return from Arion Jones, 65-yard run from Mikey Kimmel, and then Rob Lanier had some huge plays. A 65-yard touchdown rush with less than 4 minutes to play. He had an interception of Wheeland on the ensuing drive. And not only that, he recovered the onside kick after UI scored a touchdown. With 30 seconds to go, they cut the lead to 41-38. So Rob Lanier, clutch player for Bloomington tonight.
Let's talk about the man at the helm of that program, Coach Mulcahy. not from the area. He's actually from the suburbs of Chicago, played at Illinois Wesleyan, fell in love with the Bloomington area. He's been on staff for almost a decade. Now in his first year as the head coach, he's got him at 2-0. You know, what did you like about how they performed tonight?
Well, first off, I mean, 2-0 for Bloomington is going to feel great. You beat 2 playoff teams from a year ago. Danville's good. Normal U-High is very good. And, you know, for them, it was just their toughness. You can kind of tell in the second half, he wants a team to be tough. He's got that offensive lineman mentality. Hit you hard. We're going to come at you physicality. And you kind of saw it a little bit, I think, in that second half. That's why they were able to get some of those big gains. Again, huge credit to Bloomington's offensive line. They did some great plays, as well as their defensive line. Justin Robinson and David Williams made some great plays, too.
And last question for you. U-High, you know, they learned more about themselves this week. They put up 60 last week against Manual in a really tight game tonight. You know, where do they go from here?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, they have 2 games against MacArthur and Lincoln coming up next. Those are going to be big because in week 4 and 5, or I should say 5 and 6, you got Rochester and Glenwood coming your way. Those are 2 big games in the Central State 8 East Conference. So, again, they played a great game tonight. Backs against the wall. They came in. They just were down a little bit too much early to kind of get over that hump. But, again, Pioneers are a very exciting, very fun team to watch. I really like what Brody Walworth has done with that program.
All right, Jonathan, we appreciate your insight. Hopefully this is a game that we can start playing every year from here on out. It certainly delivered tonight.